As we all know, the Chevrolet Camaro ended its production life in 2023, ending nearly 6 decades of hallowed horsepower-filled history in the name of Chevrolet performance. Dating back until 1967, the Camaro was a true American icon. Throughout its production, we saw countless iterations of the Camaro that married serious power with exceptional styling. Chevrolet produced in total over 5 million Camaros throughout its production life. But there are a handful that even some of the most die-hard Chevy fans don't know about. 8 of these cars, in fact, that we'll be covering in this video, and the first of which is the fabled Motion 454 LS7 Camaro. Now, out of all the cars in this video, this is by far the most rare and arguably one of the baddest Camaros ever made. Not just because it's a motion car though, but because it's the only one of its kind. The Baldwin Motion Group specialized in upgrading and tuning GM performance machines, including Camaros, Chevelles, and Corvettes. In 1969, one of their best sellers was their Camaro packages, in which they would take an SS396 Camaro and replace that motor with a 427 big block, courtesy of a GM dealer special order code. However, one was built specifically for a unique customer, and it was never replicated again. The story goes Ray Dotterer, who was a certified speed freak, drove from Pennsylvania to meet Joel Rosen, the owner of Motion Performance, to order the hottest first-gen Camaro that he could. He wanted a Daytona Yellow 69 Camaro SS with the Phase 3 427 Motion powertrain under the hood. The salesman working with Dotterer told him that if you wanted the hottest Baldwin Motion Camaro, let's change that 427 to a 454. And the 454 in question was the newly mothballed LS7 454, the engine that was supposed to replace the LS6 454 that never actually made it into any road cars because of emissions restrictions. Only a few were left laying around to be ordered over the counter for off-road use only. And with this mythical LS7 under the hood, this car was able to make over 500 horsepower and 500 foot-pounds of torque, put down via a Muncie M22 Rock Crusher 4-speed. When Dotterer picked the car up on June 29th of 1970, this was the only Motion 454 LS7-powered 69 Camaro known to exist. Painted in the aforementioned Daytona yellow with the factory black hockey stripe and SS badging, this car offered very little inclination of what it actually had under the hood. It retained its stock rally wheels and its black standard interior, while underneath it was given many upgrades to make that LS7 put the power down so much better, like new shocks, slapper bars, and a 488 rear gear set in the 12-bolt. And thankfully, in 2024, this car still exists, and actually went across the auction block earlier this year, and it no-sold, but the bidding reached $750,000. A hefty price for a first-gen Camaro. Number 2, the Yenko Turbo Z Camaros. In 1981, Don Yenko and his tuning house threw a supercharger on 19 Z28 Camaros in the quest for speed. As many of us know, the early 80s were not a proud time for horsepower, and the 350 in the Camaro, naturally aspirated, produced at best 190 horsepower. This clearly was a far cry from the glory days, and Yenko had to get creative to squeeze more power out of these motors. So they took inspiration from their Turbo Vega experiment and slapped a Turbo International turbocharger on the car, forcing a modest 7 psi of boost into the motor. These Camaros now made 250 horsepower, a gain of 30% over stock. They coupled this with a fuel heating system and water injection system to allegedly shave 3 seconds off the factory 350-powered Camaro's quarter-mile time. There was also the Stage 2 Turbo Z Camaro, of which only 3 of these were made, and these featured 2-piece weld wheels, Coney shocks, new bushings, different seats, and a bold exterior package that would turn into Don Yenko's last Chevrolet that he ever built, before he passed away in 1987 in a plane crash, making the Turbo Z Camaro an incredibly rare car that will forever be linked as the legendary tuner's last hurrah. Number 3, the 1970 Camaro SS L78. Now, what better way was there to usher in the first full-body redesign of the Camaro than with a big block? In 1970, the Camaro saw a dramatic European-inspired restyling that made it longer, lower, and wider than the first-gen Camaro. And thanks to a United Auto Workers strike in 1970 that halted production for 67 days, many still regard the 1970 Camaro as the 1970 and a half. And because of that strike, only 600 1970 SS cars were equipped with the famed L78 396 big block, because the next year, this engine was removed from the Camaro lineup altogether and replaced with a 300 horsepower 396 for 1971. The L78, though, put out a considerably higher 375 horsepower, which would have been a blast when paired with its M21 4-speed and a posi rear. These Camaros also featured a 150 mph speedometer, 7,000 RPM tach, and they featured special 15-inch SS wheels and other optional extras like power steering and power disc brakes to help slow the front-heavy big block car down. These 1970 L78 Camaros are very sought after today for the second-gen Camaro community, in particular because they represent some of the holy grail cars for that platform, and considerably less than the initial 600 that were built are left today. But before we dive into the next Camaro, I do have to take a minute to thank this video's sponsor, Wolfbox. Now, if you drive an older car or a modified car like myself, then you probably don't get it out that much because, let's face it, you have a more reliable daily driver to do so. But if you know anything about old cars, if you let them sit for a while, chances are that battery is going to be toast when you go to crank it over next. And then you got to call your buddy who has to come bring his car to jumpstart yours, or you got to shuffle the whole driveway around to actually get your car started, and it's a pain in the butt. But with the Wolfbox Megavolt 16 jump starter, all of that hassle is a thing of the past. And when we open the hard case up, you see we have everything you need right here. And now the best part about the Wolfbox Megavolt 16 is that once we actually unwrap and unbox everything here, what you're going to see is this compact charger actually has inside of it a 16,000 milliamp battery, which means that this box right here is strong enough to jumpstart pretty much any vehicle with a 12-volt battery. And with 3,000 amps of peak power in the jump box itself, what that means for your vehicle is that you could jumpstart it literally instantly. All you gotta do is get the charger right here, open up the top part where you'll see the jumper cable connector, open that right there, plug it right in, you're gonna hear it click in, and now you're good to go ahead and plug it in on your car. As you'll see right now, mine's got 77% battery, which is plenty to go ahead and do things like jumpstart my car, plenty to go ahead and turn on the flashlight that comes attached with it for any roadside issues you might have at night. Now with all this added functionality, you might be wondering about charge times, and that's just not something you gotta worry about with this thing because it charges in less than an hour and a half to full charge. And a full charge in this box right here, you know what that gives you? That gives you up to 40 starts on a dead battery. The Wolfbox Megavolt jump starter is an absolute must-have for any serious car guy who wants the peace of mind of knowing that no matter where they go, they're not going to be left stranded by a dead battery. And now for a limited time, you could save up to 40% off on this jump starter on Amazon, or if you prefer to shop on their website, then you can also save $20 on your purchase there as well. Both of those links are down below in the description. So make sure to go ahead and get yours today. Guys, it's a game changer and an absolute must-have for any serious car guy. And thank you to Wolfbox for sponsoring this video. Number 4, the 1969 Camaro ZL1. Now, of all the cars on the list, this is probably the most well-known and universally appreciated Camaro ever built. But it is still rare. The ZL1 was built as a true show of force, stuffing the baddest Chevy motor available at the time into a Camaro that could destroy the competition one gear at a time. This car was the ZL1. Inspired by the dominance in the Can-Am series, Fred Gibb, who at the time owned a Chevy dealership in Illinois, suggested to Chevrolet that they develop a package for the Camaro that would accommodate the all-aluminum 427 ZL1 engine as a means to help take on the Hemi-powered Mopars that were dominating the NHRA's Pro Stock class. Gibb worked with Chevrolet Engineering's Vince Piggins to help design and order an initial 50 cars via the COPO program. Chevrolet offered the ZL1 with both an automatic and manual transmission option, catering to different driving preferences. To further enhance performance, the ZL1 came equipped with a specialized lightweight flywheel, 410 gears, and a posi-track rear end. Its heavy-duty suspension and power disc brakes helped balance out the added power. Now, Chevy officially rated the ZL1's output at 430 horsepower and 450 foot-pounds of torque. But independent dyno tests revealed that the car actually produced much closer to 550 horsepower. In total, Fred Gibb and his team, as mentioned, ordered 50 ZL1 Camaros through Chevy's COPO program, the Central Office Production Order. However, they could not afford to keep them all and sell them to customers because they were kind of slow sellers, so they were sent around to other dealers. Then, an additional 19 units were later ordered by said dealers, bringing the total number of ZL1 Camaros produced to just 69. And today, only about 40 of these ZL1s are still known to exist, and each one commands a significant price tag, with the last sale being just shy of $500,000. Number 5. The GMMG ZL1 Camaros. Now, when we say a rare or desirable Camaro, you would probably either envision a first or second gen car. You may not think about the fourth gen having an equally as rare and collectible version. Well, the GMMG ZL1 Camaro is just that car. The ironic part of the story is that this new generation of ZL1 was much like the initial car, where Chevrolet didn't have any interest in building the car at first. This was sort of a fan-backed efforts of sorts, with the group called GMMG Inc., who were the builders of the Dale Earnhardt Intimidator SS car and many other specialty Camaros. The company ended up building 3 different phases of the car in keeping with the 60s performance nomenclatures and production numbers, because they only made 69 of them, which were delivered to a dozen dealerships nationwide. Of the 69 Camaros they built, 31 of them were built to the Phase 3 performance tier. These Phase 3 cars included a 427 cubic inch LS6 that produced about 600 horsepower and 575 foot-pounds of torque. That was matched to a 410 rear axle and had a catback chambered exhaust and a myriad of Corvette Z06 suspension and brake parts to fit onto the car, plus a different set of wheels that gave it a much more aggressive feel and look. Finished off with a new grille and the 1969 ZL1 bow tie style emblem, the GMMG ZL1 was the perfect Camaro to honor its legendary namesake. And another cool note is that the final car produced was built in a special Phase 4 SR427 car, and this car was actually built to honor the one and only Bill Grumpy Jenkins and his ZL1 drag car, made complete with 60s houndstooth interior, Penske shocks, and 3 different valved options for said shocks. Overall, these GMMG cars are super sweet and are by far the baddest 4th gen Camaros out there. Number 6. The IROC Camaro 1LE. Now, unlike the ZL1, which were fairly well known even for their low production numbers, these 1LE packaged IROC cars were built in secret to the point where they went into production without an official product designation, and you practically needed a cheat code to order one. Built for the sole purpose of dominating in the SCCA's popular stock racing series and the Canadian Players Challenge series, largely because back then the most performance-oriented Camaro was the IROC Z, and on track it suffered from a number of shortcomings. The 1LE was designed specifically to address all of those concerns for the people that were truly planning to race. So much so that you had to provide proof that you would be racing in either an IMSA or SCCA event. And then to order one of the optional V8s, you had to select a bunch of different option codes that would trigger the 1LE model design sheet. The 1LE was supplied with either a 5-liter or a 5.7-liter V8 that put out between 195 and 230 horsepower depending on which one you got. These were fuel-injected cars that both used the TPI system from Chevy, and the 5-speed was available with the 5-liter, and the 4-speed automatic was available with the 5.7. These cars were outfitted with a number of performance parts, including larger Caprice brake rotors matched with Corvette calipers, a shorter fifth gear, and weight reduction that kicked the power windows, air conditioning, and fog lights to the curb in true 60s Copo fashion. In its first year, only 6 cars were built for 1989, but that number jumped to 111 as John Heinrich raced one to dual championships in the SCCA Escort and Firestone Firehawk series. He was well on his way to 3 drivers' titles behind the wheel of a 1LE packaged IROC. In total, there were 1,360 1LE cars made today that were all sold into the hands of track-ready owners. Number 7. The 1967 Z28 Camaro. As part of the first year of Camaro production, racing-enthused engineers pushed Chevrolet to compete by offering a more performance-built Camaro in the form of the Z28 to run in SCCA's newly created Trans Am series. Now, as many of us know, the Camaro was a response to the mass sales success of the Mustang. However, Chevrolet at the time was not very interested in building manufacturer-backed cars for racing. But thanks to Chevy engineer Vince Piggins, he was able to convince the president of Chevrolet, Pete Estes, to build such a car. And many customers were unaware that the model existed, and Chevy didn't advertise the car either. The Z28 was simply added to the list of production codes that you could buy for the car as a performance package. Because the SCCA required engine displacement to be a maximum of 5 liters, Chevrolet designed their legendary 302 cubic inch small block, and they stuffed it with a high lift cam and a bunch of other trick parts, even like a cross-ram intake manifold, which gave it the ability to scream to 7,500 RPM with ease. Chevy rated the engine at a conservative 290 horsepower for both insurance and sandbagging purposes, and the car was available with a 4-speed manual, upgraded suspension, and power-assisted disc brakes up front. The outside of the Z28 Camaro for its first year featured its skunk stripes on the hood and trunk lid if one chose, and a 302 badge was emblazoned on the front fender. In the first year, 602 lucky customers were able to decipher Chevy's order sheet and purchased a Z28, making the first year of the car super rare and actually the lowest production of any Z28s for that first generation. And finally, number 8, the 1997 SLP 30th Anniversary Camaro LT4. Now next on the list is a celebratory car of sorts. The year was 1997, and that meant Chevrolet needed a way to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Camaro. And what better way to do it than with a high-powered beast? SLP Engineering, who was a performance parts house, took leftover LT4 engines from the 1996 Corvette Grand Sport production run and installed them into 100 Camaro SS cars. These LT4s were nearly 11-to-1 compression motors, and they had a red line of 6,300 RPM, which made them over 330 horsepower, which was potent for a pre-LS1 4th-gen Camaro. But they didn't just stop there. SLP rebuilt the chassis to handle the extra power and even dyno tested and road tested every car to ensure it was ready to rock. These anniversary cars were also given performance exhausts, lightweight drive shafts, Bilstein sports suspension, and a limited slip diff. They also got the T56 6-speed manual and were capable of 0 to 60 times just under 5 seconds and a quarter-mile time of 13.3, which were practically identical numbers to the 96 Grand Sport Corvette. All 30th anniversary LT4 Camaros can be identified by the Arctic white paint with the Hugger orange stripes on the hood, roof, and deck lid, with matching orange SS badging on the front fenders and rear deck. It was also given a functional hood scoop to help feed the LT4 fresh air and help make this 4th gen a truly cool piece of American history. And with that, that is the 8 rarest Camaros ever built. I know some of them are very obscure, and that's part of the fun. Now, please let me know if you like this video, and comment down below if there's a Camaro that you think we missed, or if there's one that you would like us to explore in more detail in the future. Thank you all for watching.